Jenna, thanks so much for joining me. I've always been meaning to kind of reach out to you about the Freedom Convoy and everything else. But before we get into that, how are you? How did you end up in the Freedom Convoy movement?
Well, I was pretty much on the side of freedom since the beginning. Oh, sorry about the dogs in the background.
No worries.
Right when things happened, I didn't really agree with what was going on. It didn't make sense to me. But nobody around me felt the same. So I kind of just kept that to myself. And I needed a job, and then I knew that my local hospital needed COVID-19 screeners. And I thought, well, great, I'm not scared of COVID, so perfect person to be a screener, right? And, I kept my own beliefs to myself. I had an issue with what I felt was going on with the mental health crisis, and I could see it working in the ER. I could see young kids coming in with mental health problems, and I had friends who had businesses, and their businesses were being affected. There was a lot, but it was just kind of accumulating. I started finding people, like-minded people online, because that's really the only place that I could go to find like-minded people. And then at some point, I don't know why, but in the spring of 2021, I just kind of had enough. Like I had seen too many young kids coming in. There was too much that didn't make sense. And I also could feel where the direction was going. I could feel that. Sorry, the dogs are playing right beside me right now.
No worries.
They don't listen very well either. Can you hear them on the?
A little bit, but that's okay. I can always edit this part out. It's not a big deal.
Okay. Yeah, so in the spring of 2021, I had pretty much had enough, and there was just, I could feel that I knew what was going to be coming next. A lot of us in, I guess you would call it the freedom movement at the time, this was pre-convoy. A lot of people in the freedom movement, we knew what was coming next. We knew that the vaccines were going to be mandated pretty soon, and we knew that there was also going to be segregation down the line. And of course, anyone that I talked to and mentioned this to, they looked at me like I had 3 heads and I was crazy and that would never happen. And so just like the gaslighting and everything, because it's hard. It's hard when you can see what's going to happen. And I get that people don't think it's possible, but then so much of it has happened, But anyway, so I decided to go to my first End the Lockdown protest. And that was in my local town.
I was going to ask you, Jenna, before we get into that, I want to know more about your thoughts on freedom and why that gravitated so much, why you were so gravitated towards freedom and trying to protect it. And I think that's a really important distinction that a lot of people don't know enough about.
Right. I guess I've always...
It's okay.
I'm going to see if I can let them outside. Is that
sure?
Possible?
Yeah,
okay,
of course. Take your time. Yeah. That is so hilarious. I think that's the first time I've ever had someone have their dogs next to them.
I knew this was going to happen. My landlord's dog comes over to play with my dog, and there's tractors in the field out back, because I had them outside before, and then they were chasing the tractors. I literally got in at like 10:29 from chasing them.
Gosh.
Oh my goodness. Anyway.
Oh my God. Okay, so you want to? We can start over. You can start. Start fresh. It's no big deal. It's no big deal.
Oh, maybe we should. I feel bad.
No. Man. This is good. This is all part of it.
There might be barking coming from outside, but at least it's not like them wrestling right in my face.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Man.
Okay, so let's start. Okay. Let me start. I guess. Freedom. So.
Okay.
What drew you to the notion of freedom. And I think that's a really important distinction because many people believe in freedom, but they also believe in kind of the freedom being
Limitations.
curtailed. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
What is it about the term freedom that means so much to you?
That's a tough question. I mean, I feel like I thought that everybody believed in freedom the way that I did. I thought that it was kind of a no-brainer, that, for example, when it comes to speech, I had seen what was going on with speech and I wasn't okay with it, but I still identified with the side that was doing the canceling and doing the censorship. I still wasn't really making that, I guess, distinction. I didn't have that realization yet that the group of people that I thought I aligned with, I didn't actually align with.
Yeah.
And also it was like, well, it's not my beliefs or my words that are being canceled, so it doesn't matter. But there was still part of me that it knew it wasn't right and it didn't make sense. But in terms of what the word freedom means, oh my goodness. I guess I just didn't know that I've always been more of a libertarian. I never knew what like a libertarian was. And I guess I've always been that way. I just didn't know that there was a term for it. Even though I don't really like to use like the political labels.
Yeah.
Because I also am not like, I don't know. I'm a spectrum. Like I'm very green. I'm very liberal. I'm very conservative. I don't know. It's just, I thought freedom meant the same thing to everybody. And I thought it was like this universal thing everybody knew, especially from things that have happened in the past and how those things have happened. When you start censoring speech and you start canceling people, it's a slippery slope, and each side that does the censoring thinks that they're on the right side, and that's how it's always been.
That's right. So, yeah. One thing I was going to ask too, and I've noticed this across many Freedom Convoy social media accounts, which is it doesn't seem like it's right or left. It seems like it's a much bigger concern about freedoms being curtailed, whereas others accept freedom, but then they understand where government curtails their freedoms for specific instances in the case of COVID vaccines and making sure everyone's vaccinated. But your opinion and your perspective is very much, freedom is freedom writ large, and we should defend it writ large. And it doesn't matter who's in power. Yeah. But if anyone's trying to curtail freedom, we really need to let them know that this is not right. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, freedom, there are laws in place. We know what is a crime and what's not, and we have a justice system to deal with that. And I know that progressivism is good in many, many ways, but I feel like it's almost kind of going full circle in some, because it's going a little bit too far. When they start, it's like, it's one thing to want to be open to new ideas. It's a whole other thing to want to completely abolish every old idea.
Yeah.
It's like being so open-minded that your brain falls out. Like, like it's good to be open-minded, but it's in terms of like, for the freedom, everybody's so nuanced. And for me, the big thing is what didn't make sense is if there were people, it's like if people want to put themselves at risk and they want to go and spend time with their family and their family feels the same, I feel like they have the right to do that. Like just speaking of lockdowns in particular, it did not make sense to me at all. I think I don't know. I just thought that it was common sense, and I understood the idea for the public health measure and everything and protecting the hospitals. And then, as time went on and we saw what happened and how it wasn't the death rate that we thought it was, and things still stayed in place, it got more and more silly to me. But when it comes to freedom, also in terms of the bodily autonomy thing, that's a big one. Like, I just, it's like from everything that we've learned from history and, thalidomide is an example, like, yes, the medical industry is good. It can do a lot. Obviously it's amazing and we need it, but to grant them this like godliness where they can say, no, this is what everybody must take or else.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't know.
No, you're right. And I want to get into all of that because I think that's a very important point that people hear. But these ideas led you to attending your first protest against the COVID-19 mandates. Canada was very unique in that sense. You know, we were, some say, harsher than other countries, some say not as harsh as other countries, but we were definitely more harsh than many countries in the
Yeah.
G7, I
We were
think.
in the we were in the top there. Yeah, for
Yeah.
harshness. Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so, first of all, what led you to the protest? What was the protest about? And what was the general experience attending?
So the protest was called an End the Lockdown protest, and at that time, that was the big. Well, it was the only mandates in place were masks and the on and off lockdowns.
Mm.
Which I don't know if you would call that a mandate, but it was,
Yeah.
anyway. So this was before the vaccine was mandated, and what led me there was having been working in the hospital and seeing the youth that was suffering and coming in with their mental health problems,
Mm.
and it was just getting worse and worse. Just people that I knew, friends that I knew who had businesses that were struggling, and my own mental health that was struggling. And
Yeah.
I have a young daughter, and she hadn't had a birthday,
Wow.
since she was born, like a real birthday party.
Yeah.
It was too much for me, and it had gone on too long, and not enough people were standing up. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll go to one of these. I was naive about it because I thought they can't fire me for going to a protest. I don't bring this issue to work. I do my job well.
Yeah.
I was very naive. And
you worked in a hospital, right?
I was working in the hospital. I was working in the ER as a COVID-19 screener. And so even though it was a small hospital, so it's not really one to compare, I know that the big hospitals were busy.
Yeah.
I had a different experience. And yeah, it was just, I think I had enough. Too many people I knew had enough. And too many people I knew were too afraid to speak up as well.
What were some of the, you mentioned mental health that you saw from youth in the hospital.
Yeah.
What were some of the situations you saw?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of, I didn't know the specifics. I just knew that there was depression and anxiety and things like that. But
yeah, 7 months into the lockdown, I didn't even know what the word anxiety meant. And I had my first anxiety attack, and it was so scary. And
really,
I always tell people, it's like when people used to tell me they had anxiety, I would always say, like, oh, you're just super like nervous. I mean, that's strange. Like, just don't be nervous. I didn't understand the mental health situation. And then I had one, and it was, I think, strongly due to the social isolation. Being alone, being by myself.
That's another thing. I live alone. Like, it's just my daughter and I, which I do enjoy being alone, but it was a lot.
Yeah, for
it was
sure.
a lot. Yeah. And, not knowing many people. I did have some close friends that I made throughout this. We kind of figured out how each other felt about it through like online, and we were like, oh, you think the same? Okay, cool. Okay, well, let's chat, and so there was that at least. But it's like, it's hard. It was really hard.
So you were working in the hospital, you were seeing all these young people come in with mental health issues. It was amazing to me seeing how many people younger than myself going through anxiety and depression during this time, very scary time. You're seeing this, you're living on your own with your daughter, and you're experiencing all the feelings of anxiety and potentially depression as well. And you start going online, you start connecting with people. What did you find in those early days of connecting with people online? Were people reticent talking about this, or were they openly discussing it? What were your kind of initial experiences online with it?
In the very beginning, I didn't see many because I only had social media accounts where the only people that I followed were people that I knew that I
Hmm.
had met in person. So there was not many out of the people that I knew who were posting anything about this. Um, so I felt very alone. And then
Mm.
I'm trying to think when it was that I finally. I think I started seeing. I started maybe seeing one person post something from someone else's page, and then I would click on that page and be brought to that account, and then from that account I would find other, I kind of have to go and do some digging and searching to find these accounts where
Yeah.
I could at least be able to communicate or meet people who feel the same. And
Yeah.
yeah, but in terms of why I went to the protest, yes, it had a lot to do with that. But I think mostly the main reason why I went is because I felt this like impending doom. Like I knew, like I just felt like I need to help in some way because I know things are about to get worse. I know that the government is
Mm.
about to force this on everyone. I know, and I personally didn't want it. I'm not saying that other people shouldn't get it. I think everybody should have that choice. That's the point.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand, or I don't understand some of the anger. Sorry, not to go off topic, but
No.
I don't understand some of the anger directed at the people who were protesting and calling them anti-vaxxers and how dangerous they are, because they want you to have your choice. They don't want to
Mm.
take vaccines away from you. They don't want to
Yeah.
make it so that vaccines don't exist.
Yeah.
They want you to be able to choose, and for them to be able to choose what goes into their body and what doesn't. And so that just never really made sense to me. But anyway,
No, I think just on that, I think you're totally right. I think when it comes to these large scale movements, there's sadly it attracts extremism at the very fringe tail ends of it, and then what happens is that one person walking with a swastika or a Confederate flag gets picked up by all the media channels, and everyone jumps on it and says, like, I told you, they're all racist. They all
yeah,
don't want immigrants. They all don't. And that's the tragedy, because
yeah,
there are real, what I would consider moderate policy objectives that are trying to be
yeah,
put forward, but they're lost when the fringe elements move in.
exactly. Well, and it's a very good example because, I think it depends on media, which
Yeah,
media is reporting.
fair.
Because, for example, there was the left wing media in the States during the BLM, and they, the bad apples who were doing the rioting, yes, they do not represent the protest. They do not
Yeah,
represent why the
of
people
course.
were there.
Yeah,
And, the right wing would focus on the
yeah,
bad apples. And then,
agreed.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's just
100%.
that it's totally true, but that's it. There's bad apples in
Everywhere.
every movement,
Yeah,
and they do not represent the
no.
movement itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you attend the protests and you find people online who are like-minded. People are kind of reticent talking about this online. How did your employer kind of find out about this? Because to me, it's like you're right as an individual to protest government
Yeah.
um, mandates and
I thought
things
so
like that.
too. I thought so too. Oh, even this topic just kind of makes my whole body go. Ugh.
Mm,
It was
yeah.
such an awful time. So, I had actually gotten rid of my personal social media accounts at that time, and I had like a separate one. I don't think I had that blonde freedom chick one yet, but I had a different one. So, I didn't want to I didn't want to post anything, or I didn't want to have anyone that I knew following me at the time. I was just tired of seeing the same stuff. Anyway, so
Hmm.
I didn't see or even go searching for the local news report of the local protest that I attended. I had no desire to see if I was in any photos. I was just gonna, move on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was my sister who saw that they had posted online. I think that's very same night, and she's very protective, and she was kind of commenting because there was a lot of hate and a lot of like um, comments from people that I knew saying things, and they didn't see me in the photos. I don't think, because the only photos that I was in like the background.
Hmm.
But they were commenting things like, oh, this is atrocious, that these terrible people were doing this in our town. And
Wow.
just, it was like, I mean, that's maybe sugarcoating what they said. Like, there were some awful things being said. And my sister was defending the protest, and then someone who I am no longer friends with. Oh, I hate bringing this up. It's just, I'll try to not like talk too much about it. It's
You
just
don't have
that
to talk
I know.
about it.
No, it's okay. It's just
No,
I know
we
that.
don't have to talk.
No, we can. It's just I don't want to be too specific about.
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah, of course.
it's like I forgive those people for what they did, and I don't want. They know what they did, and I'm sure they feel awful about it now, and I'm sure that they regret it. But I also know that a lot of people can relate probably to my story, and sort of like I don't want to use the word lynching, but it almost feels like, you know, just this angry mob that just comes to get you. And so, and the worst part is that it's people that you grew up with, like, you know, that you played hide and seek with as a kid and stuff like that. And it's just like, you know, completely gone.
That's heartbreaking.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's okay. If we don't want to talk about it, let's not talk about it.
No, it's okay. It's good. It's important. I've been like trying to prepare myself. It's just each time it's still kind of anyway. So this person sort of outed me as being in the photos, and the fact that I worked where I worked and I did what I did, and I think that kind of maybe that comment sort of put a spotlight. And then more people who I knew started to figure out that I was in the photos, or I guess were examining and trying to see who this person was talking about. And someone contacted my work and basically told them that, I don't know what they said exactly, but something along the lines of that I was, you know, at the protest. We don't know who, but someone also contacted my sister's job and tried to get her fired for defending the protest or defending me.
So terrible. So these people were literally going to your employer and saying, one of your employees went to a protest, an end the lockdown protest, and they should be fired. Like they should lose their livelihood because
I'm not sure what was said exactly, but obviously they were told that I was at the protest, and I don't know if they specifically said like you need to fire this person. But the next day I got a phone call, and I was put on a suspension, and they did an investigation, and then I was terminated with cause.
Oh my God.
So
and this is all happening in Canada.
Being able to say this while like not crying, I don't know why I can't do that.
No, it's very emotional, so I totally understand.
It's just hard, like telling the story. I realize how awful it is, you know. And it was a really, really hard time. So anyway, so I couldn't collect EI.
Couldn't collect EI.
No.
Wow. And you have your young daughter. Jesus.
Anyway, luckily I did have some really good friends that I had made, and my one best friend who's amazing. And she was at the protest as well. Her husband was working for a construction company, so at least within a month he was able to get me a job with the construction company. So I worked construction for a good amount of time, which was nice, actually. It was kind of, it was nice because I was finally in an environment where I had, I was able to talk to people who felt at least, you know, the same way, you know, in terms of the freedom aspect. And so that was kind of nice. And I was very grateful for that.
I just can't believe, and you know, you and I have chatted quite a bit about this because I think that this is such a powerful story, Jenna. I just can't believe in the country that we live in that this could happen. Like that an institution can do this and be within the law to doing what they did. I mean, I don't
know. Like, I think it's within the law. I don't know.
Fair.
I don't know.
Um, we hear stories about this from other countries around the world, and we turn on the news and we kind of we absorb what's going on, but we're like, man, that's terrible. And then we turn off the news and go back to our lives.
Yeah.
And that's happening right here in our own country and happened to you.
Yeah.
How did that experience kind of mold your perspective on what the government was doing? How did you feel in that moment about what the government's mandates were and lockdowns? Did you kind of say, you know what, maybe I should just accept this and tell my employer I'm sorry and let me just go back, I need the employment kind of thing? Or did you kind of say to yourself,
No.
this is wrong and I need to fight against it?
No, I couldn't. I was also going through this period at the same time where I felt like I couldn't stand being inauthentic in any way or shape or form.
Yeah.
And I just so it was almost a blessing in that way, because I felt like I had to bottle up a little bit at my job, you know. There's I see it now, you know, in hindsight, it was a blessing. It revealed a lot about people who I once considered friends. It revealed a lot about what people are capable of. And I know that I think that they thought that they were doing something noble and good. And I understand that, you know. Mm-hmm. I understand how when emotions get high and people get scared and all of this is happening, your focus kind of narrows, you know. And but that's what's unfortunate about that, is that I think that's what happened, and that's how it was so easy to make, for the media and the politicians to make an enemy out of, you know, this group of people. And, you know, fear had a lot to do with that. But no, I could never go back and say I shouldn't have gone to the protest. No, maybe I'm just not that type of person. I just I mean, I am stubborn, but I felt in my heart, and I knew that's kind of what kept me going too, is I knew that I had done nothing wrong, you know?
Yeah. My heart goes out to you, Jenna. That's just terrible what happened. But I want to kind of take what you experienced and start talking when you first heard the phrase Freedom Convoy. When did you start seeing that pop up? And again, it seems like it's very clear what gravitated you towards that movement, but how did you feel when you first started hearing about it online or in media?
I felt relief. I felt like I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was, you know, whenever I heard about it, it was, you know, I was segregated at the time. I wasn't allowed to go into public places. It was actually, it wasn't, I had heard about it a little bit, but I didn't know if it was actually going to happen. I had heard about it a little bit in the fall, I think, end of summer. And, but I didn't know if it was actually going to happen. And then it wasn't until around Christmas time that I started to really see people posting about it and talking about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is happening. And Christmas was really hard for many people. Sure. I was not allowed to go to any of my family's Christmas dinners, for my extended family. My immediate family, they were okay. They were supportive. They knew, you know, but it was my extended family on both sides told me I couldn't go to Christmas. And wow. So it was just, after going through like pain, and then hearing about the convoy and seeing people posting about it and it's actually going to happen, it was just, it felt so good. I just felt so much relief.
What drew you to the convoy? Because, you know, when I first started hearing about it, I couldn't believe, I thought for sure, you know, often people say these things online and nothing materializes. I just totally off topic, but I remember Area 51, like there was going to be this big like storm Area 51 and we're going to release all the aliens and all that. I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine that actually happens. And then it didn't materialize. And I was thinking, oh man, these things online, they always say that something's going to happen. How did you feel with the Freedom Convoy? Because that happened. Did you ever feel like, oh man, this sounds too good to be true?
Yeah, but I did have those thoughts, but I also got used to pushing those thoughts away because I realized there was so much just depressing things happening and so
Yeah.
much almost defeat happening for us that I was like, I don't
Sure.
even have room for doubt when it comes to this. This is like the
Yeah.
last thing that I have to hang on to. So I was just like, I don't care. I am going to believe that it happens until it happens. I just,
Yeah.
I kind of pushed those doubts away. And I was just seeing the whole, like everybody that I followed, we were just all so excited about it. And it felt like we were getting our power back a little bit, like when you're kind of kicked down for a really long time, it kind of felt like someone came and like helped pick us back up onto our feet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And those were like the toughest, darkest months of Canadian winters here. January, February is really cold, really icy out.
Yeah.
And we were still, I think we were in some type of lockdown at the time, or they were doing the regional lockdowns. I can't remember.
Even
Everything
remember.
blurs together now.
I can't. Yeah, I know.
But you still saw the purpose of going out despite your environment. And in addition to everything that you've been through, what propelled you to fully embrace the Freedom Convoy even more instead of, again, leaning back from it and just kind of maybe being online only? You decided, no, I need to be there. I need to actually.
I wanted to take part. Yeah, so I wasn't able to be in Ottawa, unfortunately, but I was able to be. I was able to see. I don't even know how many trucks there were. It was basically their last stop before getting to Ottawa. And so my best friend, who is a superwoman, she had made a lot of connections with women in her church, and we were taking donations, and
Wow.
we were taking food, snacks, water bottles, Gatorade, like anything we could. Women were making cookies, and it was all of these, moms and families just trying to do whatever they could to pitch in. Some people were giving money. Some people were, kids are making little cards and pictures for the truck drivers. It was amazing. And then we made breakfast for, I think we fed about 150. I don't know. It could be more.
Whoa.
My friend would know how many people, but I got to meet so many different people. And a lot of Polish people who have experience with, communism, and they had some insane stories. And it was just like, the amount of immigrants that I was meeting who had escaped, this type of thing. And now I saw it happening again. And, so it was freezing cold. We made a really big breakfast and fed as many of them as we could.
That's amazing.
And we got to see them off on their way to Ottawa. I had made plans a few times to try and get to Ottawa. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I have kind of a rinky-dinky car, and a few times that I made plans with my friends to go up, it kind of fell through. It didn't work out. But I was able to be there with them at least and help in whatever way I could. And what's really cool too is we actually made breakfast in this old abandoned school bus.
Oh, no way.
That's
pretty cool.
So a friend of my friends, she has a lot of children, and I don't remember why, but she bought this old school bus, and they put a wood stove inside of the school bus. And and that's where we made breakfast at about 3:00 in the morning. And it's freezing cold.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And what would you say, because this is really amazing how it seems like a shift, like almost instantly as you describe it, because, you going online, not seeing many people kind of speak up about this online, to now the Freedom Convoys coming up, and people in the community are all kind of rallying together to help support the movement. What would you say kind of helped along that almost quick shift for people to be so openly supportive of the Freedom Convoy?
I think it was, the people who were openly supportive are the people who were doing this, trying to fight in whatever way they could this entire time. And then I think the Freedom Convoy was just this shining bright star of hope. It was like, I think we all knew that this was probably going to be our last chance, our last effort. Yeah. In some way. Or at least that was a worry, that it was going to be our last chance. So I know for me, I just I went gung-ho. I was posting about it all the time. I started posting again on my personal page. I didn't care who I was upsetting.
Oh,
Like, I did not care. I was posting about it. I was sharing about it. I was following, as the convoy was happening, I was following it every day. I was posting what was really going on, from people that were taking live streams or whatever it was. I was watching the live streams. I was trying to send out love and good vibes, even though I couldn't be there in person. But
yeah. So that's incredible. So you start posting and you start supporting the Freedom Convoy in any way you can. Again, and it seems like you hit this new stride in your life. You go from a really challenging period to now one where you feel a sense of hope and a sense of change. Did you at any point ever feel like the government will have to change their policies? There's just way too many of us and we're making too big a statement. They have to change. Tell me what your expectations were of the government in moving the yardstick forward and kind of getting rid of these mandates.
I think I knew that they would be resistant. I didn't expect Trudeau to hide from them for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe I did. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think as soon as, I think it was, what's his name? Scott Moe? Is it Scott Moe, who's Saskatchewan? Yeah.
Premier,
I think he dropped the mandates or announced that he was dropping the mandates, if not the day the convoy arrived. It was at least within the first few days that he had announced that. Yeah. And then, you start seeing the trickle effect and it just kind of builds your confidence. Like, yes, this is happening. This is happening.
Yeah.
And it's like the pendulum is swinging. There is no going back now. We've hit the breaking point. It's time. Like, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it was like, but there was a lot of, at least I felt like it was kind of a roller coaster feeling, because it was like each day that something really amazing would happen, it felt like there was like something else that was kind of the opposite, like more slander, more like the running with the story that it was a white supremacist movement, and then people believing that. And then, these bad apples showing up with a swastika flag. Although I think I heard one of them, apparently, I don't know if this is true, apparently one of the people who was there with the swastika flag was doing that because he was claiming that Canada was now fascist, and like almost like a message, but it's like not really the message that we really do. If you have to explain the message to people, maybe don't do it. It's only gonna harm the movement really at this point. But I don't know if that's true. I heard that was one individual's reason, but as for the other people, I don't know what it was, but it's that obviously hurt, because having to do the whole, they don't represent the whole movement. Like, look at all the diverse people, look at every different type of people, like basically every type of person that exists was at the convoy, and there was a lot of up and down, I guess. With that.
100%. And I think most moderates in Canada understood the frustration that the truckers and so many people were having with the government, right? Yeah. The mandates were getting so over the top. The rules really didn't make any sense. You had to mask in certain areas. You didn't have to mask. I mean, small businesses were being shut down, but Costco, where everyone's jammed in, is open. So most moderate people were... Sorry, go ahead.
I meant to add, I don't mean to interrupt. I forgot to add, part of the real reason why it was also, at this point, it was like a breaking point, I think, for all of us, is this was right when Quebec was about to impose the tax on unvaccinated people.
Right.
There were polls that were coming out of CTV, either CTV or CBC, I can't remember, asking the public, if they want to fine or imprison the unvaccinated people. And it was just like, it's gone too far. It's more than gone too far. If we're already having this conversation openly and you're taking polls about this, no.
Yep, you're totally right. And in fact, I have that up, and I'll leave that in the links for this episode. But CTV ran a poll on whether or not people believe that the unvaccinated in Canada should be fined or taxed. On January 11th, 2022, Premier François Legault announced that a new health contribution would be applied to unvaccinated people in the province in response to the COVID-19 cases and resulting on the strain of the healthcare system. at the time of this writing, which was in January, it said that the financial penalty was yet to be determined, but Legault, indicated that if $50 or $100 is not significant enough for him, it will not apply to those with a medical exemption. So those that choose to be unvaccinated without a medical exemption will be fined, and $100 is just not enough for Premier Legault.
Yeah.
This is wild. This is absolutely wild. Now, I need to catch myself when I say that, in that I think people at the time would say, we're in the middle of this global pandemic. There's a lot of people being hospitalized. Our hospitals are being overrun. Getting the vaccine is your way to help the community. What would you say to those people who are saying, you know what, I'm not getting vaccinated because I necessarily like it. I'm getting it to protect others.
Right. Well, in this case, I wish that applied. But we saw even before the segregation happened that this vaccine was not stopping transmission.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't stopping infection, and it wasn't stopping transmission. And we knew that the summer before the convoy showed up.
That's right.
I mean, I think they were still calling it breakthrough infections at that point, but everybody knew so many people who were fully vaccinated who had got it already. But that's one thing I forgot to mention as well is the convoy was also fully vaccinated people. It wasn't just unvaccinated people. It was fully vaccinated people who were there in support. And also a lot of them just were done with the mandates. Maybe they didn't want to be forced to get more boosters if they didn't want more boosters, or they didn't want to be forced to close their business. They didn't want, when I say it was every type of person imaginable, it was every type of person imaginable, it was.
Yeah.
But, to the people who say that you need to do it to protect the community, I guess the transmission issue, unfortunately, doesn't apply to this, so that doesn't apply. But also, if it's, because I remember hearing some politicians talking about that point and saying, oh, no, it's not, like for the segregation anyway, it's not because we want to stop transmission, it's because we need to make life as unlivable as possible for them until they comply for their own good. Kind of going along with the line of, no, unvaccinated are the only ones at risk, and we need to help them by making their lives hell. Kind of contradictory. But sorry, I don't know if I can say hell on here.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay. But
No, you're totally right. I wanted to ask about the protest itself, and I know you weren't in Ottawa, but there were a lot of people complaining about the municipal bylaws that were being broken, noise laws, things like that by the protests, the blockades that were snarling traffic and shutting parts of Ottawa down or rerouting traffic around it, people losing their hearing, people complaining that, they've been impacted negatively by the protest, their mental health. In addition to the mandates, they're dealing with the mental health issues from the protests as well. Yeah. What would you say to that? Because that's the challenge when these movements get so big and so impactful, that there are these negative things that happen, and they're not meant to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
But their opinions are also, I guess, important to how we discuss this too.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I have so much empathy for anyone who was harmed in any way by, the noise or any of the blockades. Although I think, obviously with the hearing that's been going on, there's been a lot that was kind of had been shed light on what was true and what wasn't, in terms of like what the media said and what. But so I won't say that I know many of the specifics on that when it comes to the blockades. But with the people who were being affected, nobody's intention was to harm the people of Ottawa. Clearly, it was to try and get the leader of our country to listen. And he refused. He not only refused to listen, he then continued his rhetoric of slandering those. We were there because we felt harmed, Many of us were harmed by what he was doing. And he ignored us and then just continued to slander us and call us names and, perpetuate this hateful rhetoric against us. And Unfortunately, I feel like it's his behavior that caused the Ottawa residents to suffer. Because, I mean, yes, I think there was probably some people who were maybe honking more than they should have, or didn't stop honking when they were supposed to stop honking, and I'm not, but the reason why the protest continued as long as it did is because this man did not come and talk to us and hear what we had to say. And that's what's unfortunate about the situation is these people were harmed in Ottawa in various ways. And what's sad about that is they were harmed because we were harmed, We were harmed, nobody would listen, and then they had to be harmed by us being harmed in a way, I don't know. It's just, it's a
casualty.
It's unfortunate.
I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I don't know. That's one thing that I would ask those residents as well, if I could, is what would they suggest to be the alternative? Like, what could we have done?
Yeah.
Because nobody was listening. Everybody was going along, following in line, doing what they were told, which I get why they did that, but what were we supposed to do?
Yeah. And, that's the thing. It's like, so when it comes to Trudeau not speaking to the protesters, so I thought about this throughout the protest. I thought this is where I think a lot of, again, moderate Canadians kind of were disappointed in their leader and saying, you know what, there's protests you're going to like and there's protests that you're not going to like. But when I wouldn't consider the Freedom Convoy a traditional protest. I think of more of a movement. Right. And when a movement's that big and it's cross country, as Prime Minister, you kind of have to lean into that really, the uncomfortableness of talking to people who 100% disagree with you. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Trudeau, though, saw the flags of F Trudeau and, all these kind of like disparaging remarks that some were saying towards him, that he was kind of like, well, I mean, what am I going to gain by going out there? I'm going to just go into the, belly of the beast. People are going to be yelling at me. Security might be breached. Do you think those were some of the reasons he might have said, you know what, for my own personal safety? I don't even think he was in Ottawa at the time. I think he actually was in Montreal
for COVID or something.
That's right.
Which, again, and he was like quadruple vaccinated and still
right. Fair.
But I think that I think they moved him out because. But again, I think that was kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't. It's just when
fanning,
you're a leader, you're gonna have
fanning the flames.
Yeah. And also, these are your citizens. They're supposed to be your citizens, and they're upset with you. And they have a right to be. And if you're the leader of a country, you're gonna have to be okay with people being angry at something that you do. But they were there with an offer to talk, at least the organizers. They wanted to have some sort of agreement happen or some sort of a negotiation, And that's the thing. It's like it's one thing to go out there and talk to protesters who are protesting for something that you agree with, but that's the whole point of protesting, especially when it comes to government decisions or government policies.
Yeah.
You're probably, the people who are there doing the protesting are probably going to be a little angry with you.
Just a little bit.
They're protesting things that you've done. And
you've
also said some terrible lies about these people. I think if we live in a free country, if we still do, we're allowed to express our anger and frustration in, saying F Trudeau if we want to, if we get to a point where we're not allowed to say that about our leader anymore, then we're in a scary place.
And, that's the thing. I think that you're right. The right to protest should always be there. And, the fact that Trudeau not only didn't speak with folks and then doubled down and invoked the Emergencies Act. What were your thoughts, when the Freedom Convoy was moving on and then we started seeing blockades along trade routes and things like that in Windsor and Alberta? Do you think that really propelled the government to start saying, okay, this is getting out of hand, Emergencies Act, boom, like we're getting rid of this immediately? Like,
I think
what were your thoughts about that?
I know that the blockades at the borders, I think, were ended pretty swiftly. At least I think it was within the first week. I think. I don't know for sure, but But also those, I think the provinces where the blockades were also did,
Yeah.
they went and they got rid of, or started agreeing to get rid of the mandates.
Yeah.
Which I guess it's like holding the border hostage in a way.
Yeah.
But which I don't know. It's just like I don't know. It's like that people say like protests are supposed to make people uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Right.
maybe in some sense it could seem a little extreme, but we felt what was being done to us was pretty extreme.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's hard, it's hard to answer. Like, I'm sure that there were ways that they probably could have been better or improved, or I don't know. It's just like, it's hard to make sure that it's perfect, but it's like we're trying to counter one extreme, or an extreme that was being done to Canadians. How do you counter that? It's, unless you have to get a little bit ballsy, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to me, this all has what I would consider a moment of growth, I think, for everyone, because you released a wonderful video on social media, which I'll link to and put in the video as well of our chat, where I think you accurately summarized the sentiment of most protesters by saying things like, for those that don't know, we lost everything. We lost our livelihoods. And then we honked.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a tongue in cheek, but it's really saying like, we lost everything. And yeah, we went to Ottawa and we maybe violated municipal bylaw zones and things like that, but it was all because we were pushed to the edge. And too often on social media, I think a lot of people jump on the extremes and the people who are calling conspiracy theories and things like that in the government, and they're not approaching the Freedom Convoy in this kind of moderate way. And I think your video was able to strike that balance. What kind of propel you to do that video? Because I found it very engaging the first time I saw it.
It's funny because I actually almost didn't post it.
Really?
Yeah. I don't.
Wow.
I thought it was too vulnerable. I thought it was too. I don't like being vulnerable, so it kind of made me feel a little bit. I don't know. I don't like it. I like being tough, but I don't know. I made it. It was something that I felt needed to be said. I think that the morale had kind of gone down with at the beginning of when the Emergencies Act inquiry was happening. I could see it with people in the freedom movement. They were kind of feeling discouraged, and like, we've been trying to have our voice kind of like what I said, how it's like we've been trying to get them to listen to us for so long and they haven't, and now the media is only paying attention to the people who were affected by us trying to scream louder,
Right.
and how us trying to be heard hurt them, so yeah, I started to also just think about, instead of getting angry and frustrated, I started to really think about what it would be like to be those Ottawa residents, and how I'm sure it was for people who didn't understand, because I know that unfortunately, there's some people who don't understand even now why the truckers were there.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say, but there are some people who think that they were there because of mask mandates, and that's the only reason. I think there's a lot of people who unfortunately are out of touch with what the other side has actually experienced and is experiencing. But I think for those people, they were probably affected because they're like, I don't understand why this is happening. This is horrible. And then if they're seeing on the news that it's a whole bunch of white supremacists coming to their city, that would make it even more traumatizing, like that's not, and so it's so hard because it's like, no, that's not what it was. But yeah, that would scare me too, if that's what I thought it was. And like, some of the elderly people who had no idea what was going on, and, or parents with new babies who couldn't sleep, and all of these things, like, these are real people and they were affected, and I do feel so sorry that they had to be affected in that way. And it's kind of like, what else could we have done? I feel bad, but it's like, I wish I almost wish that they could also have empathy for us. Some of them are starting to, but some of them aren't able to. So I think we might have to just extend that olive branch and be like, we understand, and it's sad that it came to that, you know.
Yeah. I've always had this idea, and I'd love to know what you think about this, but I've always had this idea that after the inquiry is complete and the report's done, there should be like some call to action, very similar to, I wouldn't say truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, but something along the lines of, this is the experience that happened. This is the extent in which government went, including invoking the Emergencies Act. And moving forward, we're not putting forward recommendations. We're putting forward like appropriate actions that government should do in these scenarios. Like,
right.
Preventing people from donating to a cause that's important to them is, I think, illegal.
Oh
right?
my gosh,
like,
even
illegal.
you saying that, I even thought about that. I can't
right?
even believe, like, honestly, even to just talk about what went on with the convoy would take like hours to just go through everything that was done, everything that was like, what is happening right now? like, it's, I even forget the extent of the amount of things that happened. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. Seizing bank accounts.
Yeah. Like,
oh my gosh.
This stuff is right out of like a totalitarian state. And so we should remember that, it can't get to that point, and the government has a responsibility to connect with people who, if it's a movement to the size of the Freedom Convoy, the responsibility is even more on the government to connect. Mm-hmm. And, when you don't, this is what happens, and this is what can happen as a result. But I wanted to kind of wrap our conversation up by talking about you and what you've learned from this entire experience, and how you're kind of moving your social media forward and continuing the advocacy on this very important issue.
That's a good question. When it comes to the social media situation, I'm kind of just doing what I feel. I feel like I'm maybe getting a little bit more comfortable with expressing myself. I mean, I prefer to keep it like, I don't want to be I don't really want to be like trolling and like doing that stuff. Yeah. There was recently I had made a video only because I was so frustrated by it, but I prefer to keep things light and humorous if I can. But also I think I've realized, because I've been afraid to be like, oh, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to, you know. But when it comes to bullies, like, because there are people out there who are bullies, and it's like, no, if you're standing up against a bully, you're not mean. Like, somebody has to stand up against a bully. And sometimes you have to be a little harsh when you do that. But for my social media, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just, I'm going to continue, I guess, doing what I feel is right, and connecting with people. One thing that I feel like I've gained throughout this entire thing, which is probably going to sound surprising. So I used to not like people, like, before the whole COVID thing happened. I'm also vegetarian, so I'm like very much like, humans are just a cancer on this earth, and these poor animals, and I still love animals, but I was very much in this state of mind where it's like, humans suck, But, and surprisingly, the amount of pain that I've gone through and the amount of hurt that I've felt from my fellow human, I've also gained so much more, and I actually love humans now, which I don't think I did 3 years ago. So I'm very, very pro-human now, which I wasn't as much before, in a weird way, if that makes sense.
that makes total sense. Yeah, and we're all in this. We're all on a different spectrum, and I think that's what kind of makes us like relatable to each other. It's like people may not agree with everything the Freedom Convoy did, but most people understood the main message. I think that's really important. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day, being as open and honest about your story. Yeah, I'm sorry
for crying there.
No, do not apologize. More Canadians need to hear stories like yours. And, it's not trying to convince anybody of anything. It's just, this is what happened. people's lives were really ruined. And coming out of this is the extent in which people had to go to fight for their livelihoods not to be ruined. And I think we're all feeling the impacts of the Freedom Convoy, in my opinion. Shortly in March, they started kind of removing the mandates and the lockdowns and things like that. And I would always tell friends, I don't think if the Freedom Convoy happened, this would have happened as quickly. It may eventually have happened.
Yeah,
but
it's funny because I do encounter people who say, "Oh, well, it's not because of the Freedom Convoy." They just don't want to admit. Well, the government will never admit that, but I think a lot of us know the truth.
Yeah. And I think like the fingerprints of the Freedom Convoy are all over the government now and its policies. Removing mask mandates on planes and things like that, and I'm hoping that moving forward, God forbid there's another pandemic, that they learn from this experience and say, okay, like let's take a more reasonable approach and try to manage this as best we can without curtailing too many civil liberties for too long.
Yeah, some might say that might have been their intention, but maybe we're getting too much into the conspiracy part now. If we say that.
Fair.
But
but I don't want to take up more of your time, but I can't thank you enough for, again, being so open, so honest. We're going to keep this conversation going because I think there's so much more to unpack. But thanks so much for sharing your story, Jenna.
Thank you for inviting me. This is very cool.
Awesome. All right. That's pretty much it.